The Buffalo. Good morning to you again, and welcome to this special opportunity to look back at our church's initiative and bring back the Buffalo over the last 10 months or so. The Fab Four of us here, James and Mark, Cheryl, and myself, along with Pastor Dale and Stephen Parks, had the great privilege in June to represent all of you in a special encounter trip to the Pelican Lake First Nation Reserve. It's an indigenous community and territory covering about 90 square kilometers in northern Saskatchewan. Our purpose in going was to celebrate with that band at Pelican Lake the establishment late last year of a new herd of buffalo, which itself was part of an act of reconciliation with this particular band of Canada's First Peoples. Shortly, we'll be presenting a video that James has kindly prepared, showing scenes from our trip. But first, let's take a quick look back at what preceded our trip, what got us going out there. So Bring Back the Buffalo is an initiative led by a social development organization called Local Koa, which means brave soul, in partnership with Tear Fund Canada, which is a Christian relief ministry and a long-standing partner of our own Faith Promise Ministries. The goal of Bring Back the Buffalo project is to build relationship and pursue reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and to help rebuild their cultural identity by working to reestablish self-sustaining herds of buffalo, which is an animal which had played a vital part in their culture and livelihood for centuries. Mark?
As you may know, vast herds of buffalo once roamed the Great Plains of North America and were a principal source of sustenance by First Nations tribes there. Senseless slaughter and wasteful overkill of these herds by European settlers, bounty hunters, and so-called sportsmen decimated the buffalo population, almost to the point of extinction, and shrunk the territories in which they were free to roam. This abuse of plentiful resources left many First Nations impoverished with an insecure supply of food, not to mention the loss of hides, bones, sinews, etc., on which they depended for much of their livelihood. During the past 10 years, the group Local Koa has planted 9 herds of buffalo on 9 different reserves in Canada, most of which have not had buffalo on them for up to about 150 years. Over 500 calves have been born from these 9 herds. The new herd at Pelican Lake is the 9th, consisting of 20 pregnant females and 2 males, which is the typical number when planting a new herd. This past spring, those cows gave birth to 18 healthy calves who were happily cavorting in the fields when we got there. Whippy's contribution to Pelican Lake is a gift that will keep on giving and giving. Several years from now, when the Pelican Lake herd reaches about 100 head, the leadership has committed to hive off 20 pregnant cows and 2 bulls to establish a new herd on another reserve, and to continue doing that as the herd is replenished by natural births. In the meantime, the band will be harvesting some buffalo annually to improve their food security and supply of protein and obtain other animal byproducts.
The planting of the new herd at Pelican Lake is the first one for which Tear Fund Canada took the responsibility to raise funds. The total cost has been up to $150,000. That covers the purchase of 22 animals from a commercial buffalo ranch in Alberta, their transportation to Pelican Lake, the fencing of fields and woods where the buffalo will roam, and for Local Koa to train Pelican Lake folks on how to properly care for the herd, and probably the purchase of hay to help the herd through the first winter. You recall the Advent conspiracy at our church held late last year, which raised over $9,000 for Bring Back the Buffalo project at Pelican Lake. In recognition of that donation, we were graciously invited to send a delegation to observe and celebrate the herd's presence on the reserve and to engage in building relationship and trust with the leaders of this First Nation band during our 2 days there. Tear Fund considered our visit so significant that its CEO, Wayne Johnson, and a senior staff member, Roberta, honored us by coming along to observe and participate with us, as did a Tier Fund board member and 3 leaders of the Lokakoa team in Saskatchewan who also transported us.
At Pelican Lake, we were honored to be hosted in the lovely home of Chief Peter Bill and his wife Karen, and 2 other members of his family. His sister Leah Bill, who came over from Edmonton to be with us, and Uncle Charles, who serves as the band's knowledge keeper for Indigenous culture, history, and spirituality. Our first evening all together, after a splendid dinner prepared by Karen, was spent watching a game on TV in the Stanley Cup Finals and jointly cheering for the Oilers. That was good for relationship building. For sleeping, Grant had a nice bed in the house. Mark, Dale, and I slept on cots in a real teepee, and the Parks were comfy in a trailer. The Indigenous population on the reserve is about 1,500. Sadly, it is common among them to find unemployment, relative poverty, and serious social problems, including addictions. The video will have pictures of one community, which includes a social housing, a food store and a gas station, a school for up to grade 12, an apartment building for teachers, a water treatment plant, and a community center with arena. The construction of a new group of houses for elders is in progress down by the lake.
Okay, so now we're going to present the video that James prepared of our trip. Be watchful for explanations of 2 features of this whole initiative. First one is why specific acts of reconciliation by Christian churches with First Nations are important and appreciated. And second, why First Nations in the West place such a high value on the buffalo. After the video, we'll have a time for questions and answers. Okay?
So here we are on leg 1 of our journey to Saskatoon. We started out at 11:30 this morning in Whitby with 6 people in our group. And let's see, we lost Grant in the lineup for security. And then Steve realized he left his phone in the truck and turned back. They turned Mark back at the gate because they didn't like the honey that we'd brought, and we had to go check it in at the airplane with Porter. And so basically, it's just down to me and James now. We started with 6, we're down to 2. Hopefully, our group reconvenes at some point, but in the meantime, pray for us, and we'll give you another update as soon as we're on our way.
You want to grab a coffee?
Yeah, I'll get you.
I'll come with you. How's it going, Mark?
It's going good.
This is going to be the whole trip, by the way.
Okay.
How long is this flight?
About 3.5 hours.
3.5 hours?
About, yeah.
Okay. Do you know what flight path we're taking?
Yeah, we're going in the air and then landing. So here we are on leg 1 of our journey to Saskatoon. We started out at 11:30 this morning in Whitby with 6 people in our group. And let's see, we lost Grant in the lineup for security. And then Steve realized he left his phone in the truck and turned back. They turned Mark back at the gate because they didn't like the honey that we'd brought, and we had to go check it in at the airplane with Porter. And so basically, it's just down to me and James now. We started with 6, we're down to 2. Hopefully, our group reconvenes at some point, but in the meantime, pray for us, and we'll give you another update as soon as we're on our way.
You want to grab a coffee?
Yeah, I'll get you.
I'll come with you. How's it going, Mark?
It's going good.
This is going to be the whole trip, by the way.
Okay.
How long is this flight?
About 3.5 hours.
3.5 hours?
About, yeah.
Okay. Do you know what flight path we're taking?
Yeah, we're going in the air and then landing on the ground.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. How I like to fly.
Yeah, start on the ground, then we go through the air, and then on the ground again.
Okay. Okay.
So here we are in Saskatoon. We're just got picked up by our friends at Tear Fund, and we're on our way to our hotel. And we're going to have dinner together and then start talking about the trip up to Pelican Lake.
We just departed Saskatoon on our way for a 2-hour drive up to the Pelican Lake Reserve. Yeah, look how fast the fields are. I'll bet you the wind.
Here we are in Pelican Lake. We're on our way to
The Buffalo Pound.
the Buffalo Pound. We're on our way to the Buffalo Pound. We're going to participate in a sweat lodge, and then we're going to see the buffalo. Looking forward to it. We're all here in one piece. Still have 6 from Whitby, and we'll report back later.
Well, we're on our way back from our sweat. For most of us, this was our first one. Really cool experience. Opportunity to join together and pray, and an opportunity for us as Christians to hopefully honor the Lord by honoring other people.
Now, what was the sweat exactly?
What was the sweat exactly? So there was a built blanket. Well, it's a sweat house, a bit of a blanket fort, essentially, put up on sticks with a fire pit in the middle, which had multiple rounds of hot rocks brought into it, and then a bucket of water to steam it up. The door was closed, and it was completely dark in there. There was, I think, about 18 of us in there at one point.
Grant and Cheryl only made it 1 round, so then there were 16.
Yeah, and traditionally it's 4 rounds, which includes different songs and prayers, and they explained to us kind of what was happening and what they were planning to do, and it got very, very hot, and to its name, we absolutely sweated out. I think I lost about 5 pounds.
Did you enjoy the experience?
Yeah, it was a really cool experience to dive into the culture and get an appreciation of something that's meaningful to them, and feel like, as I said, hopefully we were able to honor the Lord through being part of it.
So here we are at the house of the chief of the Pelican Lake Reserve on Friday night. We just had an amazing circle time, and me and Mark and James are sleeping in the teepee tonight.
Look at that.
Yeah. Oh, and the fire just sort of blazed up a bit to kind of give us some lighting. Yeah.
This is nice.
It's the first time I've ever slept in a teepee before.
I'm sure that's a first for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty good assumption.
Well, this story is really a story that most of us in Canada were never taught. We were not taught it in our schools and growing up. And it is the story of what we did as a society and as a government to the First Peoples of Canada. What we did for almost 150 years was pass laws and policies that allowed us legally to round up Aboriginal children, to remove them from their homes and families and communities and everything that was familiar to them, and to place them in residential schools where they were away from everything familiar for weeks, sometimes months, and sometimes years at a time. There we had a primary goal, and it was to so-called civilize the so-called savages and to Christianize them and to do everything that we could so that over the course of time they would be fully assimilated into Canadian society and there would be what was deemed to be no more Indian problem. That's what we did, and we did it for decades and decades. The last residential schools in Canada closed in the 1990s. And throughout most of that time into the early 70s, the federal government contracted the churches to run the schools. Indeed, the first residential schools were set up and established by some of the Protestant and Catholic churches, many of them based in Quebec, who spread out across the country. And then these mission schools became eventually government-run schools and residences in the later 70s and 80s. And what we know now, thanks to the bravery and the courage of those little children who grew up to be adults and started speaking up about what had happened to them, is that those experiences not only were in and of themselves very traumatizing, but they happened in situations where the children were ripe for abuse in cases where there were any deviants in the midst. And it has left devastating impacts in the communities and in families, because many of those learned behaviors are the very ones that those children brought into their own adulthood, and then as the courageous ones are able to say, they did the very same things to their children in many cases as had happened to them. And so we are in the midst now of a really compelling national conversation and national opportunity to say we can't cling to our ignorance. It's true that most of us alive today had nothing to do with the schools and knew nothing about it. We're not taught about it. But it is also true that we live in the present, and we are the ones who will be responsible for the future. So we are all invited to have this enormous and I think compelling conversation about who we really are as a country, who we really have been as a country, and who do we want to be as a country. How do we want to live up to the values that we claim about ourselves throughout the world? And how do we provide proper redress and build meaningful relationships between the First Peoples, the Indigenous peoples of Canada, and all the rest of us who have come from so many other parts of the world?
Yeah, well, when I signed up to be in the teepee, I didn't realize that all 3 other people that are in the teepee will be snoring, but that's okay. We got through it. The crackle of the fire drowned some of it out. But no, it was overall not a bad sleep, and totally worth it to be able to be out here and engaged.
Sweet.
Oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah, you can see engraved in the palm of his hand.
Oh. Yeah, just at a gas station filling up. I'm lying down because of reasons.
I'm tired.
No, I had to make room for them to get out of the door, but it's hard to explain.
Yeah. No, we're good.
Yeah, it was really good. I've been here a few times. You know, get very so you will always send somebody.
When is it normally open?
It's open.
Oh.
How you doing, Mark? Good. Really cool to see. Where are we? Currently, these are new homes that have been built for the elders or the knowledge keepers. And the lake, Pelican Lake, is just on the other side of those trees. You can maybe see it through there a little bit. Yeah. I got a good shot over there. Yeah. So Charles and some of the others will end up moving into these houses, and then there's plans for another 10 to be built here as well.
Nice.
I'm not sure yet. We've been given tobacco. And
What is tobacco used for?
tobacco is used as a way of asking to be invited onto land, and so you leave a bit of tobacco as a way of sort of humbly asking for permission to be here. is how I understand it. And we're at the lake, and we're seeing the homes that are being built for the elders, and we're going to go do a water ceremony in a bit, and so the tobacco is part of that. So here we are at the buffalo paddock, just about to go in and see the animals. And Wayne, what were the numbers again? The herd was 20?
So the herd was 20 females and 2 bulls. Our hope was that many of the females were pregnant, but it's very hard to confirm. And amazingly, we had 18 calves born this spring.
Yeah.
So 18 what they call red dogs. They are born at approximately 40 pounds, and at the end of 1 year, 800.
Yeah.
That's a lot of grass to eat.
And you can see them out there just dancing around with their mamas. All the little ones. It's pretty amazing.
Probably too far.
Yeah, so we're going to go in and say hello.
Every aspect of the animal was used, and you probably heard this on some of the other documentaries. So not only was it food, it was shelter, and it was medicine, because all of the, from the hoops to the horn, everything was used. There are very specific medicines that are used from the buffalo, like the horn itself, as a smudge for healing mental health issues. All the entrails, the intestines, everything. So it was more than just an animal. It was a life-saving creature for us.
We lost our identity. We lost our culture. We lost our families. We lost everything. We lost the buffalo. And now they bring hope in our culture, in our families.
We've received our bison, and our goal is to, reach 300 head of bison to sustain our community with food source.
Children don't know what was in the past, but this is the future. So now hopefully it's something that we can teach our younger generation. I feel that Pelican Lake First Nation is blessed to have buffalo be delivered to them. It's an honor to see buffalo on Pelican Lake First Nation.
So from a healing and a recovery of nations, bringing back the buffalo means a lot to us, because what that means then is we are regaining self-determination. We're regaining a vision and a purpose.
I thought the buffaloes were fast. They were flying.
It was good, and the buffaloes were actually really fast. That's my first time actually ever seeing a buffalo.
It's good that them buffaloes are back, even though they were almost killed off.
O great Father, the one who lives above us all, your name is sacred and holy. Bring your good road to us, where the beauty of the world above is reflected in the earth below. Provide for us day by day the elk, the buffalo, the salmon, the corn, the squash, and the wild rice. All those good things we need every day to feed our families. Release us from the things that we have done wrong. In the same way, we release others for the things that they have done wrong to us. Guide us away from selfish desires that tempt us to stray from your good road, and rescue us from that evil one and his worthless ways. Your good road, with its great power and beauty, will shine like the sun until the time beyond the end of all days. Aho.
Thanks again to James for putting that together. Yeah. Okay. No. Might as well mention this at the moment before we get into questions. At the end of the Sweat Lodge ceremony, we each of us were given a beautiful blanket. Each of them were probably different in their design. This happens to be mine. Cheryl's got one here. And it's really huge when you spread it all out. It covers a full bed, right, Cheryl?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's lovely. Just lovely. We have this one. We have it up on banister in our home, upstairs, but look down into our foyer. And also inside the blanket was a pouch of tobacco. Now, it wasn't a roll your own. We weren't going to roll our own and smoke them. Blanket and tobacco have significance. A blanket is much more than a fabric you sleep under. It's a symbol of warmth and friendship. This is for the indigenous people. The action is wrapping someone in a blanket is a real statement of kindness and a demonstration of honor. In North American traditions, a blanket is used to create and seal relationships. So that was one of their means to welcome us and honor us and show that they're open to friendship with us during that visit. And then the tobacco, it's one of the 4 commonly used medicinal plants. It's considered the most sacred or meaningful by most Aboriginal peoples. A gift of traditional tobacco is a sign of respect and may be offered when asking for help, guidance, or protection. Or as also Dale mentioned in the video, it can be given as an invitation to be on a property or inside a building with them. Okay, I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions, or at least 1 or 2 here, and then I'll take questions from the floor for ourselves. So, guys, our delegation went to Pelican Lake at a time in Canada when we hear and read much about the need for truth and reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples. And next Sunday, we're going to be celebrating our Orange Shirt Day here. In your personal decision to join the delegation and then actually go, did you feel that you were representing more than just yourself? Anybody got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely it felt as though myself and the rest of the team, we got the honor of representing this church through the Bring Back the Buffalo project, and so it very much felt for me like it was much bigger than myself and even bigger than our church, and just we're a small-ish town in southern Ontario that doesn't necessarily mean anything to the people that we went to, and so for me it kind of felt like it had to be bigger than just the Whitby Free Methodist Church and us as individuals going. With that said, the individual relationships that were built over those couple days and that I think matter to them on an individual level. That's such a huge part of their community and their culture is those individual relationships. So really cool to be part of the team and definitely grateful to represent you, and hopefully we did a good job while we were there doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Anybody else have a thought before we go on? Okay. Yeah, that was a good statement. Also, I think for me, I mean, we didn't really know much about the people that we were going to be staying with and engaging with while we were there. We didn't know that before we got there, really. But we did know that there's this whole history of the churches and the residential schools, and didn't know really whether this had been part of their history, their heritage, and what image they had of the church, but that they knew that we were coming from a Christian church. And it was an act on our part toward reconciliation with them. So that was another component of my feeling in going. So another question here before we open it up to our audience, guys. As our van rolled up to the chief's house at Pelican Lake, what was your feeling or emotion as to how you would be received? And did your feelings change during the 2 days there? Cheryl, I can see a thought brimming.
I'm not good with putting words together. I think my initial, I would say a bit of fear was the ride up there. I didn't know what to expect, especially having the conversation with Lima the evening before, our kind of tour guide. I can't even remember some of the things he was saying, but I just remember thinking, what are we walking into? Like, I didn't know, I really didn't know. So I was kind of relieved when we did pull up and it was a regular house, not a teepee. And they were just very welcoming, very welcoming.
James, any feelings about your arrival?
Yeah, it was, I was pretty nervous driving up there, but kind of as soon as we got to the house and walked in, it definitely felt like a family home. Karen, the chief's wife, was such a mom figure. She cooked for all of us. She was constantly making sure we had everything we needed to be comfortable and stuff. And yeah, it's just, I definitely felt welcomed. And the TP was a choice to sleep in. We weren't kicked out there, but yeah.
Great. Yeah, Peter Bill, the chief, is a low-key kind of guy. You know, you wouldn't necessarily pick him out as the chief of a tribe or a band from a lineup of people that you happen to meet, but a very nice guy once you get to meet him and talk to him, very hospitable. Obviously his wife was too, as James has just emphasized, and the whole family, Leah and Charles, welcoming and hospitable and open to talk with us. The house is big. It's partly a lodge because they invite hunters from outside, often from the States, to come up and hunt hunt elk or bear or whatever is on the territory during the season, and they can stay there at the lodge and have their meals provided. So it's a source of income, that part of it. And so lots of space in the house, comfortable place, and ample food. I might just mention, I was intrigued by the fact that Karen, the wife of the chief, is a white lady, non-indigenous. Peter himself is mixed. His father was, I believe, British, who came over and settled in that area, and then met his mother, who was from the Pelican Lake Band. And so Peter and Leah, his sister, and have that heritage. Yeah, for myself, like the rest of us here, I mean, we were all a little hesitant about what we're going to be experiencing, but that's part of the adventure, if you want to look at it that way. If you just stay cloistered in your own home and don't stick your nose out and investigate what's going on in the world and how other people feel and what their circumstances are, you miss something. So that was part of why I wanted to go. we certainly were well received and honored and respected while we're there. Okay, so let's open it up. Anybody have a question you want to throw our way? I honestly don't know what other groups or individuals have given to this project through Tier Fund. I don't have that information. I'm not aware that another church has sent a delegation. There may have been one or two people, one person or two people. I know Trolls Road Free Methodist did contribute toward this herd, the purchase of this herd for Pelican. I'm not sure whether they actually sent anybody out. Okay, so my wife back there is saying no, that Trolls didn't send anybody. So I don't know that any other. I had the impression that we were the first group, the first church group. But Lima, yeah. Okay.
Additionally, as well, we had a pastor, Paul, I believe it was, who was on our trip, who's from a church in the Guelph area, and they hadn't at that point contributed to this particular herd. However, he was coming along as a bit of a kind of information seeking on behalf of his delegation, not just his church, hoping to see some of that experience and be able to bring home to his local community and his delegation just how impactful that the project is to get them involved in wherever Tier Fund is planning to send the next herd, or with Lococo as well. So that was for someone who hadn't been super involved in the project, not that we were super involved, obviously we contributed, but he very much had seen his parents live out that way in Saskatchewan, and so he had a different kind of take on that region and had a little more experience there and wanted to share that back home with his church and his delegation to increase this project moving forward.
Yes, I think the project is pretty well funded. I don't know where all the money has come from. Certainly the 9,000 plus that came from this church was very happily received, but it certainly was not by any means the sum total of what was needed for the total cost. But I think Tier Fund is hoping to expand the project, continue it in the sense of having another herd or two bought and given to other reserves in Saskatchewan or Manitoba. Any other question? Thanks, Audrey, for that one. Yeah. Anybody else want to say before I make a comment? Okay.
I know they did.
Yeah, the local band, they have to provide all of the land on which the buffalo were to roam. So there's currently, I forget how many acres they're on, but the paddock is set to be expanded multiple hundreds of acres. And part of doing that, and part of the reason it's not the full thus far, is they need to continue to work on the fencing. So all of the fencing labor is done by locals and provides that work and that job opportunity for them. So we saw the piles of steel piping and fencing that they had been trucking through the woods and creating those paddocks and fences for. And that was a huge piece of their contribution to the project. And from what we understand from Lima and from Wayne from Tier Fund is around the need for that to be a partnership with the community. Just providing them and doing all the work for them, there's less of a sense of responsibility for it, but building in the fences and providing the land does give that sense of responsibility and makes them feel as though the buffalo are theirs and they're theirs to take care of, and which they are.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, and as you heard a little earlier from us, I guess there has been some training provided by Lococoa to some of the people there as to how to effectively or appropriately manage a herd of buffalo. It's not, you just don't throw the buffalo out there. Let them go if you're going to fence them in. So you have to take care of them appropriately, eh? Christina? I don't know. I assume there's some veterinary expenses, at some point. But I'm not sure about that. Whether they just let them go. There's monitoring the herd, I suppose, during calving season. Make sure that the calves that are born are taken care of. I don't know. There's a horse there. Somebody had.
So instead of like a herding dog, there was a horse that kept them all.
Yeah. Sort of. When we were out there in the field with on our vehicles driving past the herd, here was his horse up on a little bit of a knoll, maybe, standing there stock still, as if, hey, these are my guys. You don't get too close to them. When we did get a little too close, maybe they ran off back into the woods. Yeah. Other questions?
So what did the designs mean?
That's a good question, Jessica, and I don't know. It's pretty.
I'll get Pastor Dale to look into that.
All I know is that it's pretty, right? And it keeps us warm at night. Yeah. Are they all what? I assume they are. They all looked healthy to me. I'm not a vet, but yeah. So 18 out of 20. As you said, it's a little difficult. I don't know how they determine that a buffalo cow is pregnant. It is a wild animal, so I guess they had put the bulls in with the cows and hoped that the best came from it.
Was there for each of you, was there a moment that was especially impactful or especially memorable that really shaped the experience of the trip for each of you, and why?
Anybody got a quick comment? I'll kick it off. Our meals were served inside the house on a serving table there, counter, jam-packed with bowls and plates of every conceivable food almost. It was great. We certainly didn't lose weight while we were out there. If Mark lost some weight inside the sweat lodge, I think he probably got it back from the meals. Anyway, all to say that this house and lodge of Chief Peter had a big veranda on it, a lot of the way around it, and chairs and tables out there, and we'd go out and just sit and lounge and chat, and ask questions of Peter, or ask questions of Leah, his cousin, his wife, his sister, who was very astute in indigenous culture, and so that was good times. Almost every meal, that for breakfast, lunch, dinner, we were out there lounging with them for a while and enjoying chit-chat. It wasn't all about indigenous matters. We didn't get into things that we knew were sort of thorny about the indigenous circumstances and some of the issues that a reservation like this faces. But some of it came out just in the course of a conversation or a gentle question that we might have raised. Anybody else got a memorable? How about the sweat lodge? You heard what Mark said about his experience in the lodge during the sweat lodge during the video, and you saw a picture of it. And he said there are about 18 of us inside there. We were sitting there, cheek to jowl. The men were just in shorts. We all had to strip down just to shorts, and the women were covered. There's about 60% of the 18 were men, and the rest were women. And as Mark also intimated, the heat inside there once they got it going, and with the door down, with the skin hide covering over the doorway, it was pitch black, and the heat was overpowering. At least for me, it was. And Cheryl and I, we took the easy route and ducked out after the first of the 4 rounds of prayer and chanting. So, you want a memorable experience? Go inside a sweat lodge.
Mark, you actually did 5 rounds of that? There's like an extra round after the main 4. It's called like the cowboy round. That's what they were saying. And Mark was, he's the only one who was brave enough. But I think for what kind of stuck with me was just how gracious they were that they were letting us, be a part of these ceremonies.
Yeah.
Like the water ceremony was very impactful for me, and just seeing how woven their spirituality is like in their lives is like they live it in every breath, and it's kind of inspiring and something that I wanted to kind of take home and live with like my life in Jesus. And
I think as for me, the Sweat Lodge stands out as a very memorable experience from that weekend. But even before it, when Charles Rabbitskin was kind of explaining what was going on and what we were about to take part in, and going through some of the explanation, which I feel like in some senses was explained really well, but you cannot articulate the heat in that lodge through words. Like I was in it. James was in front of me because of how many of us there were. Dale was on one side of me. Another member was on the other. And I could not believe the heat coming out of that, and just how they use a bucket with a pine branch to put the water on the rocks that have been heated up for hours in a fire. And every time I heard that pine branch hit the side of the bucket, my brain was just like, no, please no, don't do this again. And then a blast of heat like you've never felt before, with absolutely zero wind. There's no breeze in there. You can't see it. You just know that it's coming. I was worried James was going to fall forward into the fire. And apparently so was Steve. No one could see this, but Steve was doing this in front of James. For what people said, how long were you in there? An indefinite amount of time. We have no clue. We have no sense of time. 4 rounds, each round is a different amount of time every time they do it. It's a different amount of songs, it's a different amount of prayers. And they tricked us one time because they sang a song and did some prayers and then paused, and then sang some more, and then paused again, and then they opened the door. And all I could think to myself was, we are halfway there. We are halfway there. Like, I can do this. That was 1 round.
What?
It was very hard to keep doing that after that. And I knew that if I got out of the Sweat Lodge at that point, there's no way I would have been able to convince myself to go back in. But back to more the before and the explanation, their connection and spirituality, as James mentioned, specifically to nature and to the earth, is such a huge part of their culture. And as someone who grew up within a farming family north of here, and my grandfather and different family members continue to do that, I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of understanding God's creation and nature, and just the way in which it builds them up within their culture, and just everything is connected. They say to the Creator, and during that kind of explanation and speech, and him going through the stages of the fire and different things like that, like my brain was trying to, on rapid fire, sort through what parts of this I can accept and believe, what parts of this kind of throw up red flags, that sort of thing. And so much of it, like, I can get behind praising a creator for the amazing creation that he's created. And as James said, it was inspiring to see that and feel as though I need to do a better job of that. So that really stuck with me from that experience.
I'll be honest, I was praying, please don't let me die. It was so hot. I think when Mark actually was talking to Ellen in the teepee, didn't he? I think he said something like, oh, how was that? I said, oh, where I almost died? Like it, and I only made it through round one. The lady beside me had done it before, and I didn't know that you could go out. So she's like, go, go. I'm like, okay, she needs out. She can't do this. So I got out because I was closest to the door. I can't, and Grant.
I was grateful for that.
Grant was kind of crawling out, and they were all kind of worried about Grant. So anyways, the lady beside me decided she's going back in. So like I said, I didn't know you could come out and go back in. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'll just take care of Grant.
Yeah. I was the last one to go into the sweat lodge. I was looking to see whether they would say, oh, I'm sorry, we're all full. We don't have space for you. But they pushed some of the other people over a bit, and they were squeezed up like this. I won't show you here how we were all squeezed, but it was remarkable that we all got in there. So the Pelican Lake people were praying and chanting in Cree, their language. The rest of us, of course, were praying in our own language. I found it exceedingly difficult to be in a spirit of prayer when I was so uncomfortable physically. So I did try to pray on my part once I got out. After the first round, I was sitting outside waiting for the other rounds to proceed. But just it's not like a prayer meeting here, folks. I don't know. Anybody got a sense how often just by themselves they do it?
I know that one of the, I believe he was an uncle who was there and participated with us, was joking but also serious that he would like to do them every week. He loves them, and that's a big thing that he likes to do. It sounds as though they're relatively sporadic. They had done one the week before that we came, but it's definitely not any sort of kind of planned out routine from what we could gather. I think sometimes part of the sweat lodge is around healing, and I believe depending on the kind of, we'll say, situation and what's going on within the community, if there's a particular need or someone has a particular want for healing, that it would be something that they do. My understanding is they leave the sweat lodge up for chunks of the year. Sometimes they take it down during the winter or whatever, but I think it's very based around healing for them.
Yeah. 1,500 people, I believe, approximately, and what was my figure here? 90 square kilometers, if you have some concept of that. I forget. Just in the establishments there on the reserve, the store, the gas station, the waterworks. Yeah.
The chief has a bunch of farmland as well, and has locals working and learning. Charles said that he got a white man to lead it, so the chief has hired a person to manage the farm for him, and part of that is training and having people to work on it as well. But limited opportunities for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I heard that if they go off the reserve to look for employment in towns in the area, they're often met with discrimination because of who they are. You know, so that's sad. It's sad. But Peter, the chief, seems a very entrepreneurial type. He's looking for ways to enhance the livelihood of the people, to offer meaningful employment of some sort with income, because he fully recognizes the depth and breadth of the social issues that afflict this First Nation population, as well as many of the reserves in Canada. So thanks to him, hats off to Peter for doing that, and pray for him as he proceeds. Just to mention that the prayers, I don't know, they're in Cree, but what we understand, they're praying to the Creator, God. That's a frequent concept that is fundamental in their spirituality. They're not Christian in the sense that we think of Christian. Christ is the word in Christian. Christ is not part of their spirituality. They understand something about Christ because some of them have been in residential schools, or they have other exposure to people of some level of Christian faith. But does God hear their prayers? Who am I to stand in judgment and say that he doesn't, because it's not necessarily prayed in the name of Jesus. So Pastor Dale is a very thoughtful man, as you all know, and has blogs online. And if it's Dale, oh my God, here. If you haven't, it's on the connection page? Okay. Well, you can go in there, and he has some blogs, 3 or 4 blogs written after he returned from Saskatchewan. So some of them are very insightful. Well, they're all insightful, but some of them are insightful on this matter of the indigenous spirituality. Yeah. Well, you've been here for a long, unless somebody's got a really critical question to pose. We'll close it down here. You're welcome to come and talk with us at any time if you want to ask more questions. So thank you again for being here, and keep the Pelican Lake Reserve in our prayers. Just because we left there, and just because we're a long way away, doesn't mean that we can't at least pray for them, that the Lord will respond to their prayers for forgiveness, or whatever their needs, whatever it is that they bring forward to the Creator, and that the light of the gospel will reach them to the extent that it will enhance their life and their relationship with God the Creator. Thank you. Just essentially the hosts, Peter and Leah and Charles. Those were the main people.